All right, so these next two slides will take 2 seconds, but I want to just kind of cover them for the sake of completion. Okay, so just to wrap everything up in a nice bow, price ceilings lead to shortages, price floors lead to surpluses. That's something that you can see if we go back to the original stuff up here. So when there's a binding price floor, that's a surplus. When there's a binding price ceiling, that's a shortage. Okay. Why is that the case? Because a binding price floor intersects with demand before it intersects with supply, and vice versa. So when demand is the low limiting factor, that means there's more people who want to sell than there are people who want to buy. So you're going to have goods left over. And then vice versa. When the ceiling intersects with the supply before the demand, well, then you have more people who want to buy than want to sell, so you're going to have a shortage. Okay. So both of them can lead to inefficient allocations. A shortage can lead to inefficient consumer allocation. Okay, you can see that with the graph that we did later. So there's a shortage here. So you have all these consumers who otherwise would have been getting consumer surplus, okay, that aren't. But mind you, the people who are getting consumer surplus are getting more consumer surplus, okay. But there's a built-in inefficiency. And if we had the vice versa, if we had a binding price floor, then there'd be producers who aren't selling the good that would like to sell, that will be getting producer surplus, so there's inefficient producer surplus in that case. So all in all, it just decreases the total surplus. When you look at the graph, right, the way that we're calculating consumer surplus is basically the maximum possible consumer surplus here. And the reason I say that is because at this price, everybody over here from this point to this point wants to buy as well. And they might buy, depending on who gets in line faster. So if you arrange the people who buy in reverse order so that the people with the lowest willingness to pay get in line first, the actual consumer surplus is actually much lower. Okay? It's like a crapshoot. It's random who ends up getting the consumer surplus. But as we have it drawn, it's the maximum consumer surplus for this market, and that's basically assuming that the people who want the good the most are going to be in line earliest to get the good. Okay. So price controls can lead to black markets or alternatively secondary markets too. So in like a real world scenario, the price of an Eagles ticket has not actually gone down. Last week they opened up the Eagles tickets to the season ticket holders, and they're charging the same price, but you have to opt in, or maybe they're charging a marginally higher price or something like that. But you can think of it as though the demand is more or less constant, right? Demand is constant. Supply has contracted in, right? Because there's only so many seats. So in a pure market, what the Eagles would have done is they would have increased the price, right? From P1 to P2, right? Instead, essentially they artificially decreased the price to some price ceiling. Let's call it this P1.5. Let's call it P upper bar. Basically, they put on this price ceiling, right? Because they don't want to look like they were gouging prices, for better or worse. So what happens? The people who had the option to buy will buy. And what are they going to do? Well, look, all these people are willing to buy over here for the price that you pay for the ticket. And there's only this many tickets that are going to get sold, right? Or maybe because maybe there's some quota limit on this, but at any rate, imagine that this is the amount of tickets that are going to get sold. Well, there's going to be this much sold in the real world, right? And this much is going to get sold on StubHub for more than the price would have been over here, or maybe exactly equal to the price over here. So basically, you have like a secondary market that's going to do the price gouging for you. So the Eagles are, in my opinion, not acting super rationally. I think they're trying to save the brand and avoid people from getting upset, but they're doing so at a short run disadvantage where they're not actually profit maximizing, and they're allowing other people to do the same thing that they're just not willing to do. So it's like both the consumer and the producer are being screwed, and who's the only people who are benefiting are the people who are, the middle people, the people who bought up all the tickets like a-holes, right? So I think that's actually a bad outcome, but because people don't take economics one, they act really angrily when the Eagles will rise their ticket prices, even though they have every reason to, because it's a pandemic and they want to limit the number of people who want to buy tickets. They want to limit the quantity demanded, but they're not going to do that because it looks bad to people who just read headlines. Oh, the Eagles tickets went up 5 times the amount of their face value. It's like, yeah, there's a reason for that, but people don't want to hear that. Anyway, so that, in this case, it's not a black market. It's a secondary market, but imagine it were something else. It could just as well be a black market. Something that the government makes incredibly expensive. Other people, if they want it, they'll find a way to get it. If the increase in price isn't justified by the risk that you're going to take, people will find a way to get it. Okay, so that leads to black markets when there's shortages. Okay, and then when there's surpluses, that leads to a lot of wasted resources. So if you have demand, you have supply, and you have a surplus where the quantity supplied is higher than the quantity demanded, well, then you just have food rotting slowly on the aisle. Okay, and that's not good either. We don't want that. So that can be wasted resources. So all in all, I don't think price controls are a very good means of hitting that equity efficiency trade-off. I could see someone making a case for the minimum wage, which I guess is actually going to be the same graph here. So I don't know why I just started redrawing another graph, but the minimum wage would just be this graph here, where this will be W under bar. Okay, W for wage. The price is the same thing as a wage. It's wage is the price of labor. Quantity. So if this is what your consumer surplus is, this is what your producer surplus is, and this is your deadweight loss. I'm just writing DW because not enough space. So producer surplus is everything. Wait, sorry. What did I draw? Sorry, I messed something up here. Producer surplus is going to go all the way down. It's still a trapezoid. So your consumer surplus is this triangle up here. Producer surplus is this one here, and deadweight loss is this one here. your producer surplus under certain circumstances can increase, and the producers of labor are going to be your workers. Okay, they're the ones who are making the product. So you might be benefiting labor overall at the expense of industry. If the gain in producer surplus is sufficient enough to justify the loss in the deadweight loss. Basically, if this half down here, the deadweight loss due to the deadweight loss that originally was in producer surplus, so like everything below this right here, if that is higher than the gain in producer surplus, so like if A is greater than B, then workers gain, but the market as a whole loses. And in the real world, if the data is true, or I shouldn't say true because the data is kind of pointing to both directions, but if the data is accurate to say, if it's an accurate statement to say that the data supports that there's no actual loss of income, no loss of labor in particular, then there is actual no deadweight loss. It's just a complete reshuffle from consumer to producer, where the consumer will be the employer and the producer will be the employee. So that might be the case in the minimum wage, but it's kind of still up in the air. And then the last point, this next slide, too fast, too furious and too fast for y'all. This last slide is just to say what I said in the intro, which is that you can do the same thing for quantity control that you do for price controls. We're not going to do it in this class, but if you wanted to see the graph of what that would look like, this is a quantity control. All right, I'm going to wrap up there. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, have a good week. All right.